Good afternoon. I'm Yvette Murphy. I'm ACI staff, and I'm here to welcome you to this very special general session. We are very honored to welcome Dr. Jessica Ball, who is professor in the School of Child and Youth Care and co-coordinator of First Nations Partnerships Programs at the University of Victoria, Canada. Dr. Ball has worked extensively in innovative programs to protect and promote child well-being while sustaining culture, traditional languages, and community social structures. Dr. Ball will be speaking about mother tongue-based multilingual preschool and its potential to advance education on a global scale. And we very much welcome Dr. Ball with us this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Yvette. Well, thank you so much for coming and for choosing to come to this session instead of being out on the walkways in the beautiful Saturday sunny afternoon in Vancouver. And I really appreciate your taking the time to come here today. It's an honor and a privilege to be invited to address this group, and especially to address this topic, because there's already been several really interesting presentations and workshops at this conference on bilingualism, on multilingual teacher education, multilingual programs, and on culturally based curriculum. And so my goal really for this afternoon is to reinforce some of the key points that other presenters have already made, and to advocate on behalf of mother tongue-based multilingual education. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm a third-generation Irish and English Canadian, and I've had the privilege of growing up on the traditional territories of the Musqueam people, going to university at the University of British Columbia on the traditional territories of the Musqueam and Squamish peoples. I acknowledge with gratitude that we are on the still unceded territory of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, as well as the territories of the Squamish and Musqueam nations. I have the privilege of living and raising my children on the traditional territories of the Coast and Strait Salish people on the south tip of Vancouver Island. Well, thinking about this beautiful land that's been stewarded by the Indigenous people for millennia, and thinking about the diversity on the West Coast, the diversity of, as you can see, the islands and the mountains and all of the flora and fauna here, I chose a quote for us to consider. This author says, "During the years that I spent kayaking along the coast of British Columbia and southeast Alaska, I observed that the local raven population spoke in distinct dialects. Ravens from the Kwakwal, Tsimshian, Haida, and Tlingit territories sounded different from one another, especially in their characteristic talk and click." And I think that this quote is just so beautiful in that it captures the way that even when we're speaking in the same language, even when we're all in the same species, we develop distinct ways of using our voices to express ourselves. And even in the same language, we have distinct dialects. So for me as an Irish and English Canadian, I know that my English has a bit of an Irish lilt that I got from my parents. I also know that I speak a Vancouverism, that I can recognize people from Vancouver when they speak English, and even from people, like I was talking to Leona from BC Aboriginal Child Care Society, she said, "I'm from Merritt," and I just knew she was from somewhere in the interior of British Columbia and not from the coast. And certainly I can tell if somebody's from Eastern Canada or speaking English from our neighboring state, the Washington state in the United States. Our English is a very different dialect with different ways of forming words, different ways of pronouncing things, and different ways of telling stories and thinking about what's important to tell in a story, and a different pragmatic of speech. And so that's only the dialectical differences within a single language. The author Mark Halperin reflected on the lyrical nature of different languages. And when he said, Italian is like talking to a bird. Swedish is like the bird talking. And I just think that this is a beautiful expression of the lyrical nature of different languages, you know, and a kind of music of the heart that, you know, when we come home and hear our families speaking in our home language, it just is a music to our ears, isn't it? And it can warm our hearts to hear our own language, because our languages aren't just about words. But there's also a distinctive way in which languages speak to the heart. So there is a connection between language and being. For example, did you know that that English has more nouns than most other languages in the world? And nouns refer to concrete entities. And in fact, it makes it easy for young children to learn English quickly, because it's easier to learn nouns than it is to learn verbs. Ojibwe, which is one of the indigenous languages in Canada, also known as Anishinaabe, is 80% verbs. And verbs refer to the relationships among entities. And because of that, Ojibwe is much harder for children to learn. But imagine what your world is like if the language you're speaking is 80% verbs, and speaking really about the relationships among things, compared to your language being 80% nouns and speaking in reference to material, concrete objects. Hopi tribes in Central America speak of time as perpetually occurring, and therefore have no words referring to chronology. Yeah, it kind of makes me wish that I'd grown up in the Hopi language. I wouldn't have to worry about time. There are so many languages in the world that don't have any words for his and her. Many Chinese languages, and also Anishinaabe and Ojibwe. So the language that a child learns from their first teachers, often their primary caregivers, shapes the way the child experiences the world and themselves in it. So the themes for this conference are voice, visibility, and vision. So the objectives for my addressing you today are to explore ways that we can hear all children's voices in the language that they bring with them to education, increase the visibility of minoritized and marginalized children, and promote a vision for sustaining the rich repositories of cultural knowledge and languages that remain in the world today. The Director General of UNESCO has said the protection and promotion of mother languages are keys to global citizenship and authentic mutual understanding. Recognizing local languages enables more people to make their voices heard and take an active part in their collective fate. Languages are a way of connecting hearts and minds, and we're thinking a lot about the wisdoms of Nelson Mandela this year. And he said, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. And Nelson Mandela oversaw one of the most progressive language and education policies that we had in the world at the time. So what are we talking about? Mother tongue. The first languages acquired at home that has become the child's natural instrument of thought and communication. That's how UNESCO defines mother tongue. And UNESCO has been supporting mother tongue-based multilingual education since 1953. So, you know, when we think about what is the best way to express this, the term mother tongue, of course, is a gendered term. I also do research on father involvement, and I was thinking, we don't have a term like father tongue. And what about dads? We know there are many families where the mother may have a home language that's one thing, and the father has a different home language, or the grandfather has a different language. And so this is a gendered term. Now, some scholars have suggested let's use the term home languages. In fact, I just wrote a chapter for a book on educational equity, and they said change the term mother tongue all the way through your whole chapter to home language, which I diligently did. But I thought, you know, the problem with that term is that it implies that this is a language that's only for the home. It's not a language for learning. You know, mother tongues are also for school. And then some people have talked about heritage language, like the original language of your family. But the problem with that is that it's kind of the same problem we have with our museum in Victoria. We have this gorgeous museum, and a third of it is about the Indigenous peoples of British Columbia. But, you know, my Indigenous colleagues have said, you know, it presents Indigenous people as though they're peoples of the past and that they're over. And heritage language has that problem. It kind of invokes the sense that these are, you know, old. They're in an antique shop somewhere, and they're ancestral languages. Other people have suggested we use the term first language or first languages, and UNESCO often uses the term first language interchangeably with mother tongue, and we often see it abbreviated as L1. So, you know, I'm just acknowledging that there are these different ways of talking about it. Maybe we're all talking about the same thing, and there's limitations to all of these different terms. But we do have, nevertheless, this field that is growing called mother tongue-based multilingual education. Sometimes we see the acronym mother tongue-based multilingual education, and sometimes mother tongue-based BE. Bilingual education, because some countries are promoting a mother tongue-based bilingual education. So just to say, this is the world that we're swimming in and the languages, the words that we're working with at this time. So what mother tongue-based multilingual education is the practice of relying primarily on learners' mother tongue and the culturally based experiences, knowledges, and literacies that the mother tongue expresses as the foundation for learning, with some introduction of a second language in part of the curriculum, often as a formal subject of study. UNESCO has referred to this briefly as first language first. And it is important to talk about MTB-MLE or MTB-BE, because one of the, I'll talk later about the impossibilizing discourses that many politicians use to say this isn't a reality, it can't be possible. Mother tongue-based multilingual education includes the introduction of second and sometimes third languages to children, even in preschool. And we had a talk about that this morning. Even in preschool, and certainly in primary school, that children can be learning other languages, but that the primary language of education, in primary school at least, is the mother tongue. So what's the problem? Why are we talking about this at all? Well, because some children's mother tongue is privileged in early education, and other children's mother tongue is dismissed, denied, or given only token support. Research supporting children's capacity to learn multiple languages does not inform most policy in most countries, or training programs in early childhood education or in teacher education. Instead, really politics is driving a lot of language and education policy. The dominant language in a society is typically presented and advertised to children and their parents as normative, desired, high status, and required for success in school. So this is the manufacture of marginalization. Languages used and taught in early education often contribute to the manufacture of minoritization of children, whose language is not the privileged language. So UNESCO estimates that there are about 53 million children who are never enrolled in school, many millions who are failing early in school or who get all the way to primary 6 and are not able to read a single word. And most of these children are Indigenous and ethno-linguistic minority girls. So we can close doors on learning through language and education policy. We close doors to minority language children, to minority language parents, to parents who want their children to become bi or multilingual, and to the hope of a vibrant multilingual society with rich, culturally based knowledge repositories that are embodied in languages. And a lot of research has shown that having to transition to a foreign language in formal schooling is a door closer for some and a reason for low engagement and low achievement for many. So we have the effect of subtractive education. Non-dominant languages are becoming endangered and extinct at a rapid rate. It's estimated that already 200 languages in the United States have become extinct, and many more than that have become extinct already in Canada. It's estimated that by the end of this century, at least 50% of the world's 7,000 languages will be gone. Children arrive at our programs with a precious resource, their home language. Many early education systems neglect or deliberately stamp out this capacity. Some even encourage parents to use the language of instruction at home so that their children can be more school ready. So we see this diagram illustrates that about 83 languages around the world are spoken by about 80% of the people. And only about 0.2% of people are speaking 3,500 languages. International Mother Language Day was instituted about 6 or 7 years ago. It's celebrated on February 21st. And it's growing in significance as we become more aware of the language endangerment that we're all facing around the world. February 21st was chosen because it was the day, I think it was 1954, when some university students at Dhaka University in Bangladesh died, were killed by the government because of their insistence on having their tertiary education not in Urdu but in the language of Bangladesh, Bangla. So, and we know that the War of Independence in Bangladesh, where over 1 million people died, that is known as the language war. And the monuments to the people who died in Bangladesh are called the monuments to the language martyrs, because the people in what was then East Pakistan were saying we want our children to have the right to go to school in Bangla and not have to go to school in Urdu. Now, interestingly, I just have to, since we're meeting here in Vancouver, I really want to acknowledge this group in Surrey, British Columbia, just a suburb of Vancouver, called the Mother Language Lovers of the World. These people, these are mostly Bangladeshi men who fought in the War of Independence and who are advocating now for the right of ethnolinguistic minority and Indigenous children in Canada to learn their mother tongue as a funded elective study, a subject of study in schools in British Columbia, a right that Canada has been all too sluggish in honoring. In Canada, 37% of children speak English or French at home, despite having no parent at home who has that as their mother tongue. So already we see this, the growing schism between children and their parents and grandparents not being able to communicate in the same language. In Canada, we've had, for millennia, 450 Indigenous languages belonging to 11 language families. And now we only have 60 Indigenous languages left, and by the end of the century, it's projected that there will be 3 surviving Indigenous languages, Inuktitut, Anishinaabe, and Nihaya. English and French have been declared as the 2 founding languages in Canada and are the languages of instruction. We've been advocating for decades to have some of the Indigenous languages identified as co-founding languages of the country, but to no avail. So why does this matter? Well, there are various frameworks that have been brought to bear on this issue, including child rights. The UNESCO office in Bangkok is probably the most active office in the world that's really producing a lot of useful materials on mother-tongue-based multilingual education. They just produced this little document called Why Language Matters to Millennium Development Goals. And in it, they summarize research that shows that mother-tongue-based multilingual education, the right for children to learn in their mother tongue, promotes gender equality and empowers women, eradicates poverty and hunger, is a tool for reducing child mortality and improving maternal health. It helps to combat HIV and AIDS, malaria, and other diseases. It promotes sustainable development and fosters global partnerships for development, and promotes the achievement of universal primary education. So I encourage you to look at Sandy Barron's work on the UNESCO Bangkok website. At this conference, we've heard, and we often hear about trying to base curriculum in culture. Cultural sensitivity, cultural safety, culturally based curriculum, cultural traditions, cultural resource people in our classrooms, promoting cultural literacy. But we also need to bring along the language, because language is the vehicle that carries culture. Languages express who we are as a people and as individuals. So, those of us that believe that we need culture in our curriculum also need to be thinking about the languages of instruction. Some Indigenous people here in Canada have said, once our language is gone, that's it, no more Indians. Also, language can embody spirituality. My colleague, Charlotte Pelletier, said, we're taught that our language comes from the Creator, and that speaking it acknowledges our connection. We're taught that our voices are sacred, and that there is a lot of power in our words. And when we speak, our words go around the world forever. We talk about early childhood education for school readiness, but are schools getting ready for children? Many early language assessment tools assume that a child is learning only one language and is supposed to be learning the language of instruction in order to be school ready. Everyone else is seen as working against a handicap. Standardized assessment tools in the dominant language often prove that language minority children are delayed and even have language or learning disorders. This is a practice that's rampant in Canada. And yet, research has provided us with proof of concept, proof that children's first language is the most effective language of learning. Learning in one's home languages improves engagement in school and learner self-efficacy. Young children can learn more than one language. Bilingual learning does not take up more space in a child's brain. Bilingual and multilingual learning produces cognitive benefits and multilinguistic skills that make it easier for older children to learn subsequent languages. So the science is unequivocal, and those who refuse to believe it are simply burying their heads in the sand. But nevertheless, we have the impossibilizings. We have impossibilizing arguments that come from politicians, from ministers of education, and often from school deputies and school principals. It just won't work in our context. But research shows that mother-tongue-based multilingual education actually promotes, rather than detracts from, things like national unity and security. People have said, well, we have to have Zonka and English as the medium of instruction in Bhutan because, it's a diverse, bunch of communities in Himalayan kingdom, people in different pockets and valleys, and in order to have a sense of national unity and security, we have to unite everybody with one language. But a lot of research has shown that forcing everybody to give up their home language in order to learn a national language that has never been spoken in over millennia across many generations in their families and communities actually detracts from national unity and security. Mother tongue-based multilingual education promotes rather than detracts from learner engagement and success. From ethnolinguistic minority parents' support for education. Dominant language parents will support multilingual education if the parents are given accurate information about benefits to their child's innate multilingual capacity, cognitive development, and future prospects. Irina Bokova has said, local languages are perfectly capable of transmitting the most modern scientific knowledge in math, physics, technology, and so on. So mother tongue-based multilingual education works, but quality matters in order to realize the benefits of multilingual education. We need fully trained educators that have also been trained in skills that support practice with linguistically diverse groups of children. And so this has implications for providing practitioners with training and mentoring in mother tongue-based multilingual education. And we notice that it's like in early childhood education training programs, we don't teach practitioners these skills. At the University of Victoria on Vancouver Island, we have the first, in Canada, it's the first fully career-laddered Indigenous language revitalization practitioner development program that includes certificate, diploma, bachelor's, and master's degrees. So we need more of this kind of training for educators. Also, we need opportunities for children to interact with fully proficient speakers and writers of a language. That's a key ingredient for mother tongue-based multilingual education to really realize its full potential. So this has implications for who is recruited to work with our young people and who is recruited and assigned to work in which communities. It has implications for involvement of language proficient community members. We also need quality resource materials. So we need learning materials that provide opportunities for children to interact with the language. And this has implications for resource development, for the kinds of resources that we purchase, and especially for literacy materials. Now, we also know that early is good. Early childhood education in the mother tongue promotes children's positive identity as learners, opens doors to involvement of parents and grandparents, begins to establish literacy in the mother tongue, and reinforces positive cultural identity, which in turn promotes wellness. There are many successful examples of mother tongue-based early education. Now, I had the advantage of going to a mother tongue-based early education program. I mean, I was expelled from Jack and Jill Preschool, but it was in English, and my home language is English. And so everywhere that children speak the dominant language, and the dominant language is the language of instruction, is an example of mother tongue-based education. But we don't extend that privilege to everybody. But there are language revitalizations through immersion preschools in many countries. Papua New Guinea was one of the first. They're the most linguistically diverse country in the world. And they made a language policy about 20 years ago saying, we guarantee the right of all young children to go to preschool and primary school in their home language. That's the First Languages First program. In Ireland, Jim Cummins is a Canadian scholar that many of you may know because he's really one of the world's best researchers on mother tongue-based multilingual education. And he is an Irish Canadian, and he's been working in Ireland and other countries in Europe as well on the revitalization of Gaelic and other languages through immersion preschool and primary school. In Israel, in Indonesia, in many states of India, and in many First Nations in Canada, just to name a few places where this is going on. Also, we have the incredible inspiration from the Te Kahanga Rio programs in Aotearoa, New Zealand, where they actually borrowed from the French-Canadian experience with language nests and bringing young children as young as 6 months old, into infant toddler programs where they are raised in the context of the program in the Maori language. So early is good, but continuity is best. Continuity is critical to optimize potential. So, we're actually right across the street from the Olympic torch from when we had the Olympics here in Vancouver. And it was when the Olympics was here in Vancouver that I learned the word podium, and that you could use the word podium as a verb, to podium. If you really want to podium, you need to have continuity with the mother tongue as the primary language of instruction throughout primary school, until children can read to learn. Not just learn to read, which is called early exit, but read to learn, so that they've developed cognitive academic proficiency in the home language before they're asked to start studying subjects in a second or other additional languages. So then, after that, we can introduce additional languages as subjects of study, or we can introduce other languages as subjects of study even as early as primary 1 and 2, but not ask children to transition to learning in a second or third language until they become fully literate in their first language. And this is the work of Jim Cummins, Thomas and Collier, and other people have shown this conclusively as the optimal approach to mother tongue-based multilingual education. So some promising practices. We had the experience here many, many decades ago in Canada where the French, and especially in Quebec, were very worried that their children were going to school in English and were learning the French language, losing the French language and losing all the culture and the rhythm and the music and the heart that goes with the French language. And they did get the federal government to commit funding to French immersion, actually language nests for infants and toddlers, and then for preschool, and then all the way through primary and secondary and tertiary education. Eskasoni First Nation is just one example of a First Nation that started revitalizing the Mi'kmaq language, and with language nest, preschool, and then all the way through primary and secondary. And their first pilot of this, the first graduates, 100% of them went on to tertiary education, which is a first for Aboriginal academic completion in Canada. The First Language First program in Papua New Guinea is another. Punana Leo, same thing. It is said that there were only 50 people left in the Hawaiian Islands that spoke Hawaiian proficiently, and they advocated to the state government for funding to have language nests, preschool, and then all the way through primary and secondary in the Hawaiian language. And it is now said that there are at least 10,000 proficient speakers of Hawaiian, and there are Hawaiian language tracks in many of the primary and secondary schools throughout the islands. Of course, I mentioned the Te Kahanga Rio, and in Aotearoa, New Zealand, there are opportunities for Maori and non-Maori students to go all the way through school in the Maori language with learning English and Maori in at the secondary level. What we really need to get air under the wings of this idea is political will. And the Mudiad Igolian Migtran program in Wales is a very interesting initiative where people were worried about the endangerment of the Welsh language. And they have started nursery and infant toddler play groups, as well as formal preschools. And parents in Wales now have choices of having their children go to preschool and school in Welsh as the medium of instruction, or in English as the medium of instruction, or in what we call a developmental bilingual model, where they're learning both English and they're learning in both English and Welsh. What they're saying about the success of this program is that they needed community commitment, they needed government policy to support language choices, and they needed funding to make these choices really rich, positive, plausible, effective alternatives for parents and children. We also have more countries around the world that are developing new policies that support mother tongue-based multilingual education. And the most recent one that's so exciting is the Philippines, where they have I think it was about 2 months ago, that they officially agreed at the highest level that they would support mother tongue-based multilingual education and all of the work that's going to be needed to make that a reality. Also in Cambodia, some states in India. I just heard 2 days ago the Myanmar government has passed a policy where one of the states, the Mon state in Myanmar, is going to be able to have some Mon language of instruction in their primary schools. And these policies are based on rigorous research and a lot of advocacy that has brought that research under the noses of people that matter in government. And they're policies that include recruiting and training mother tongue-based teachers, teaching the teachers the languages as needed, developing mother tongue-based textbooks and other learning materials, and in some cases, like in the Philippines, developing the orthographies for languages that haven't had an orthography. So, yeah. So there's the opportunity for promoting mother languages in early education can be transforming for young learners, for families, for teachers, for communities, and even for policymakers and politicians. So, with mother tongue-based multilingual education, we hope that we can inspire a sustainable future that's rich in cultural and linguistic diversity, in which the voices of all children and families can be heard. So best wishes for success and joy in the important work that you all do. Miigwech, Haishkasiam, merci, thank you. And I'd like to end on just a book corner. I mentioned UNESCO. There's so many rich resources, and the UNESCO has been a strong advocate for many years, more than 50 years. So I refer you to the UNESCO website for lots of rich resources. Also, the Mother Tongue-Based Multilingual Network, if you just Google on there. And then 2 books. I've got flyers for one of them, the Benson and Kasonen book. And then another book by Tove Skutnap-Tangas. Are both very, very interesting books on what it takes to really move forward a mother tongue-based multilingual education agenda. Thank you so much.